Hi everyone, this is Shalhevet Schwartz, and this is Gefet, a joint project of Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha. The topic that we will be discussing today is the sugya of HaKoteiv Nechasav l'Acherim, one who writes away his property to someone else. We're currently hitting the end of the Perek of Bava Batra that is dealing with the laws of Yerusha, the laws of inheritance, and hopefully through this sugya, which discusses one very specific case of someone who tries to find a workaround for normal inheritance rules, we'll be able to take a slightly closer look at maybe what some of the broader principles behind the general idea of inheritance in halakhah looks like. So we're going to start with the Mishnah in Bava Batra, which begins by discussing a case of someone who doesn't want his sons to inherit him and instead writes his property away to somebody else, a friend, a neighbor. And as we know from the Perek more broadly, right, in order to do that in a way that works halakhically, one has to do that within one's own lifetime, right? From the moment that a person dies, then his money is automatically transferred to his sons al pi halakhah. So someone who wants to find a halakhic workaround for that inheritance because he doesn't want his sons to inherit, right, writes his property away to somebody else during his lifetime. So right, we get this Mishnah here, HaKoteiv Nechasav l'Acherim v'hineach hafanav, or someone who writes a property away to somebody else and leaves his children or his sons with nothing. What he has done is done, right? This action, this way of writing off one's property works, but in right, he's not considered to be a good guy. The Chachamim, right, look down on this person. And then we get a comment at the end, right? Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Im lo hayu banav nohagim keshura zachor latov. Right, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that if there's a reason why, for some reason, his sons do not deserve the inheritance, right? If they were not nohagim keshura, if they didn't behave properly, then the father who chooses to write his property away to somebody else is zachor latov, is remembered for good, right? If we're trying to just understand this Mishnah on a kind of basic pshat level, and this is right, the Gemara goes into this question later on, right? The question of what is the relationship between the first half of this Mishnah and the second half, the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, is a question that we're going to have to ask, right? Is it the case that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is coming to be cholek, right, on Tanakama, and to sit right, and that Tanakama would think that even if banav were not nohagim keshura, meaning even if the children were not properly behaved, a person still should not write off his property to another. Or is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel just coming to offer some kind of qualification that maybe Tanakama would agree with? So that's one question already in the level of Pshat and Mishnah that the Gemara is going to ask. But there's actually another little diuk in the words of the Mishnah that we're going to see in another girsa, right? This is the girsa of the Mishnah that is in Ketav Kaufman that actually gives us another question, right, about what exactly is going on right here in the Mishnah. And this is really a difference of two letters that actually ends up making a difference to halakha. This is the girsa of Ketav Kaufman is also the girsa of the Rif. So, right, what the Rif has in Divrei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer in lo hayu banav nohagim bo kashura zachor latov. Right, if his children did not behave properly towards him. So we're not talking about just someone who decides not to let his children inherit because they were bad people or don't deserve the money in some kind of broader sense, maybe in some ways religiously problematic, outcasts in some other way. But it seems like according to the Rif and according to this girsa, the Koteiv Nechasav l'Acherim that Rashbag is talking about is someone who didn't behave properly towards his father, or children who didn't behave properly towards their father, and therefore their father wants to cut them out of the inheritance. Right, this is the girsa of the Rif that it seems like seems to be the girsa of the Rambam as well, which is why the Sma in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch describes the difference between these girsaot and their actual ramifications to halakha. Ubatur lo katav tevat bo shura v'hamachaber ha'etik lishon harambam so Perek Vav dinachalo dekatav sham gam tevat bo. So right, there's a machloket between the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch about whether or not to put the word bo in when it quotes this halakha. Umashma, and right, what the Sma is telling us right, is the actual, right, is the nafkamina of this question. Right, right. What it means when we put the word bo in here is that Rashbag's opinion is about a case of someone who didn't was improperly being mekayim mitzvah kibbud avim, even if they were a frum guy, theoretically, right, doing good stuff in the world, but their problem was improper kibbud avim. And the Sma understands Rashbag's opinion as a machloket on Tanakama. So the Tanakama thinks that, right, even if the banav lo hayu nehogim kashura, still in ra chachamim nochahim, right? Rashbag is saying zakor latov, but that means that Tanakama must have thought that still in ra chachamim nochahim. Anyway, the fact that we passed in Tanakama here, right? We're talking about someone who eno noheg kavod karaui b'morisho, right, is not properly mechabed the people who are going to who have his parents usually, right, the one who from whom he is going to inherit. The afilu hachi shayak tamahana, right, and even so in rachachamim nochai menu. The al yomar hamorish kevan de eno noheg kavod kashura, right, that the person who is going to die and have his children inherit should not say because my children didn't behave properly towards me, I'm going to cut them out of the inheritance, right? I'm going to give my money to someone else. Rather, he should, be looking out for his biological children. This girsa and this question in general, right? The Mishnah, and the Machloket, or perhaps not Machloket, Rabbanit ben Gamliel and Chachamim, brings us to a larger question, right? A question of really the reasoning behind Dinei Yerusha in general. Why is it that, according to Torah law, biological children or sons are supposed to inherit their parents? And the Rishonim offer different explanations of this kind of really basic principle, right? It's something that we take for granted in many Western societies, but it's not necessarily the case that one should necessarily think that children would inherit their parents, right? There have been cultures in which people's property has been buried along with them, which on some level makes some kind of sense if you think of the property as really essentially going with the works and deeds of the person who earned it, right? We might also say that maybe it makes more sense for property of the deceased to become public property, go to public works, go to charity, to the people who need it most, right? Why is it the case that children necessarily inherit their parents? And so the Rishonim offer a couple of different explanations, right? The Rashbam on our sugya on Ein Chachamim Nofai Menu, right, offers on some level what's maybe a simple explanation of why is it that the Kotev Nechasav L'Acherim is not Zachor Latov, right? Why is it that the Kotev Nechasav L'Acherim is looked down upon by Chazal? Because Dika Akar Nachalado, right? Because there's a Din Do, right, that he is trying to find a workaround for, right? It's not sure, he's finding a way to do it according to the letter of the law, but it's against the spirit of the law. And the Rashbam here doesn't really offer a reason behind the spirit of the law, but maybe, I don't know, because but the reason why some HaKoteiv Nechasav L'Acherim is doing a bad thing is because he's ignoring what the Torah tells him. Right? The Rambam, on the other hand, in the Morning Ruchim provides an explanation that's maybe a little bit more satisfying on the Svara level, and kind of offers a little bit of a taste of maybe a moral explanation of what's going on here. Right, that the reason why it's not good for someone to be Kotev Nechasav L'Acherim is because he's monea tov mimishu ra'ulo. He's keeping good from someone who deserves it. Right, that there is some sense in which a person's children deserve the property of their parents, right? Maybe that's on some level a function of the way our society happens to be structured, but right, maybe there really is something about the connection between parents and children that make it the case that, right, the children are deserving of the money, and because because the father is trying to keep that money from him, there's a sort of moral problem with the Kotev Nechasav L'Acherim. The Meiri offers a slightly different tune. Right, the Meiri offers what maybe looks a little bit almost more legal, like of a legalistic explanation, right? That the children are ke'ein muchzakim, right? The children don't currently own the property of their parents, but given the the realities of the world that we live in, where they're it's not just that they deserve the money or the inheritance, but that the inheritance is considered as though it is almost already theirs. And as such, when the father chooses to give the inheritance to somebody else, he is not only like preventing them from getting what they deserve, but almost stealing from them. If they're ke'ein muchazakim, then maybe he's a ke'ein gazlan, right? There's something not quite legal, but almost legalistic about the problem with the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim. The Maharal offers an explanation that's almost a little bit more essentialist, or trying to kind of get to the nature of things, right? As the Maharal says, is Seder Olam Minagosh Olam. Right, the same that there's something kind of essential about the way that children inherit their parents to kind of the nature of the world and the way that it works. The same way that children are, on some level, some kind of biological extension of their parents, and so too with property, right? If we see property as maybe a natural right, then the fact that children kind of continue on as a continuation of their parents in other ways, biologically and maybe spiritually and essentially in other ways, then theoretically then continuing on the legacy of their parents with regard to property, right? That is also a sort of natural way of the world. And there's something about the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim that's maybe unnatural or a violation of the natural order of things. Right. So just to kind of a quick skira of these different positions, right? Why do children inherit, and what's wrong with the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim, right? It's a mitzvah. We don't necessarily have to look more deeply into it than that. And the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim is a religious problem. The Rambam kind of adds almost a moral valence to it. He says that right, mishu ra'uilo, and the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim is trying to keep something from someone who deserves it. The Meiri adds the kind of legal dimension or the legalistic dimension, giving the children a sort of muchzakut, a sort of a sense in which they're almost already possessors of the object or of the inheritance. And the Maharal argues that it's really part of that children's inheritance from their parents is part of the natural order of things, the natural way of the world. And the HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim is on some level unnatural or in some way going against the natural order of things. We're going to return now to our sugya and take a look at a really fascinating machloket between the Rashbam and Tosfot on how to read a sugya, and how to read one story, and how that question trickles down to the question of the relationship between the story that we're going to see in a moment and a story that's going to come immediately after that in the Gemara. So we're returning to the case of HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim. The Gemara is going to bring a braita about a person who tried to do just that, tried to be HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim, and what happened in light of that. In light of that story. Right. So there's a guy whose kids were not nohagim kishura, right? The case that Rashbag says justifies HaKoteiv Nechasav Achirim. So the father, what does he do? He writes away all of his property to Yonatan ben Uziel. Ma'aseh Yonatan ben Uziel. So what did Yonatan ben Uziel do? Machar shlish, v'kadish shlish, v'chazir lebanav shlish. Right. So he sells a third of it, is makdish a third of it, and gives a third of it back to the children. Ba'alav Shammai b'maklov v'tarmilo. So Shammai comes with his makel and his tarmil. Basically, Shammai is coming to criticize the actions of Yonatan ben Uziel, and as to what exactly his criticism is, that's the machloket. We'll see it in a moment. Amar le, or Amar lo, what did Yonatan ben Uziel respond? Shammai, im ata yachol lehotzi et masha macharti u'masha ikdashti, ata yachol lehotzi masha achzarti. Right? If you can take back what I sold and what I was makdish, then sure, you can take back what I gave back to the kids. It seems like Shammai had some problem with masha hechazarti, with the money that Yonatan ben Uziel gave to the children of the deceased. And Yonatan ben Uziel's like, look, I did all this other stuff with the money. If you have a problem with that, then you can have a problem with this. But if you don't have a problem with that, you can't have a problem with this. Amar, Shammai responds, Hitiach alai ben Uziel, kind of like Nitzchuni banai, right? That turns out it seems like Yonatan ben Uziel, you convinced me, you were right. I take back my criticism. Now, what exactly was going on in this story? What was the problem that Shammai had with Yonatan ben Uziel? Why was it that he didn't want Yonatan ben Uziel to give the money back to the children? So we're going to see a machloket between Rashbam and Tosfot. So what's Rashbam's explanation of this case? Klomar, right? He's on Maklo v'Tarmilo. Right? Why was Shammai coming to argue with him? Hitvakech imo al she'avar divrei hamik. Shenitkaven lateflo aminat she'lo yehenu banav nechasav. Right? Shammai is coming to argue with Yonatan ben Uziel because he thinks that Yonatan ben Uziel was going against the wishes of the deceased. Right? Why was he HaKoteiv Nechasav lachirim? But the banim were lo hayu nohagim kishura, and therefore he wanted to keep the money away from his kids. And Yonatan ben Uziel is doing exactly what he didn't want. He's giving a third of the money back to his kids. So the right? Seems like, right? It's as though Shammai is saying it's as though he gave you this money al minaf, right, on the condition that you wouldn't give it to his kids. And now what are you doing? You're giving it to his kids. You can't do that, right? Sure, he didn't say it to you explicitly, but there's in ika data de la right? There's a presumption that that's the reason, right? That's why people are quoting Nechasav lachirim. That's the reason he gave it to you. This is what Shammai is saying. Right? The fact that you gave this money back to the person's children, right? That is not an effective, right? That doesn't work. You can't give the money back to him, right? Because if you violated the condition on which the gift was given, then the gift is no longer a gift. And once you violate the condition, the gift is no longer a gift. So then it's not just that that Yonatan ben Uziel did something morally wrong, but that there's actually no tokef or no right to the gift to what he's trying to do. Right, what he's trying to do just doesn't work because the minute he tries to do it, it retroactively invalidates the gift. Right, that's how the Rashbam reads the sugya. Right, what happened? The father wrote off the money so that his children wouldn't inherit. Shammai's claim, right? Yonatan ben Uziel is violating the wishes of the deceased, and therefore the gift shouldn't even work, right? The fact that the gift that Yonatan ben Uziel is trying to give back to the children should not be effectual, right? Yonatan ben Uziel's response is, "What are you talking about? It's my money now. I took it. You can see that from the fact that I could do whatever I want with it. That I was Maki's part of it. That I sold part of it. So now it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it." And Shammai's Matham. That's the Rashbam's explanation. Then we get Tosfot's explanation. Tosfot's explanation is actually the polar opposite, right? Tosfot explains this case as a case where, with a beginning that the Breita may be left out explicitly. That what really happened at first was that the father, right, the children were lo hayu nohagim kishura. They weren't behaving well, and therefore the father was madir nechasav miyadav, right? He took a neder that his children could not benefit from his property, even after his death. And now the father's a little stuck because he's going to die. He wants his kids to inherit him, but he has no way of giving them the money because they're prohibited via this neder from inheritance. So near other Rashba, right? Tosfot is offering the opinion of the Rashba, not the Rashba of Chachmei Sfarad that we know, but an earlier Rashba who was one of Balei Tosfot. Right, right, so he had taken this neder. The hayasavu Shammai shenatan liyonatan al menat sheyitain lebanav. Right, what did Shammai think? That he had written away his property to Yonatan ben Uziel, not so that he wouldn't give it to his kids, but so that Yonatan ben Uziel could give it back to his kids, where Yonatan ben Uziel could constitute a halakhic workaround for this neder, right? It's not the father giving the children his own property. Rather, he's giving gift to Yonatan ben Uziel, and Yonatan ben Uziel can give the property back to his kid. Vayasavur sheich zirakol, and right, he thought that Yonatan ben Uziel would give all the money back. But Shammai is coming to Yonatan ben Uziel and saying, "Look, I know that's what he was trying to do, but I'm trying to tell you, my criticism is that it doesn't work. This halakhic workaround for the neder doesn't actually work in order to get around the neder. The neder is still on some level, and right, if the fact that you're giving the money as a workaround, really in order to get the money back to the kids, means that this the workaround itself doesn't really work, right? So Tosfot's explanation of the sugya, the father taking oath prohibiting his children from benefiting from his property. What Shammai's claim is the fact that the father gave the money to Yonatan ben Uziel as this workaround. It's not effective. The children still can't benefit because the gift was sort of only given as a way of getting the money to the kids. And then Ben Uziel's claim in response is, what are you talking about? I can give the money to it does work as a workaround. And how do we know that it works as a workaround? Because he wasn't giving me the money just as a way of getting it to his kids. How do we know? Because I gave the money to other things. I was marketing some of it. I sold some of it. Clearly, this was a bona fide gift. It's my money. I can do with it what I want, including giving it to his kids. Even though that was, ultimately what he wanted, it doesn't mean that really it's the father giving the money to his kids. That's two different ways of understanding the back and forth between Shammai and Yonatan ben Uziel. In fact, kind of polar opposites. Rashbam, the father, intended to keep the money away from his children. Tosfot, according to Tosfot, on the other hand, the father wanted to find a way to give the money to his children. Right, so Rashbam and Tosfot, right, polar opposite ways of reading this. So yeah, we're going to see this machloket play out even further in how they read the next part of the sugya, which is another story that is brought in order to explain the original logic of Shammai. So the sugya continues, Meikara Mai Safar. What was it that Shammai, who came to Yonatan ben Uziel saying, no go, this doesn't work? What was he basing his logic? So he was basing his logic on a different case, a case called Maaseh de Beit Poron, right? A famous case of a man who was, right, that we have in a Mishnah, Maaseh de Beit Poron, be'achad shehaya aviv mudar himenu hana'ah, v'haya mesiv b'dam. Right, so we're talking there's a case of a father who is mudar hana'ah from the son, meaning the father is basically not allowed via a neder to benefit from any of his son's nechasim, any of his son's property, but now his son's getting married. And what are you going to do? I guess the relationship's gotten a little bit better. The son wants to invite the father to the wedding, but he's making a party, and his father can't benefit from any of the from any of what's there, and he can't eat the food. So Amar L'Chaveros, the son says to his friend, Harei Chatzer v'Suda netunin l'cha b'matana ve'einam lefanecha ela kedei sheyavo abba v'yochal imenu b'seuda. So the person says to his friend, here, I'll give you. I want to give the wedding hall and the meal. I'm giving it to you, but I'm giving it to you so that my dad can come. Right? Amar lo. So the friend says to him, Im shalihim harei mukdashim l'shamayim. Oh, you gave it to me? Great. Hektish. Boom. I want to makdish this the entire wedding feast. Amar lo. So the chatan says to him, what are you talking about? Lo natati lecha elash. Right? I didn't give you this stuff in order for you to be makdish it. Amar lo. The friend replies, "Lo natata li et shelcha ela shetehe ata v'aviv cholchin v'shotim v'ratzin zel hazeh v'yavon tolui b'rosho." Right. The friend doesn't. The friend kind of doesn't want to be part of this game. So what we have at the end of this story, that Chachamim say, "Kol matana she'ina she'im hiktisha mukdeshet ina matana." Right. That any matana given, in which the recipient couldn't be makdish it doesn't count as a matana. Meaning, right, this workaround, basically saying, right, this workaround itself can't work, right? I can't give you, if I give you a gift, al minat, that you have to give it to my father, let's say, and you can't be makdish it. If you can't be makdish it, then it's not a sufficient matana. It doesn't actually get you out of this neder it doesn't work in order for, like, right, it's still really on some level mine. You can't give it to my dad. Right, Chachamim are on some level siding with the guest here, right? If it's really a gift, if you really want to get out of this neder, and if it's really a gift, then he can actually do with it whatever he wants, including being makdish. Now, how are the Rashbam and Tosfot going to read this story as an explanation of Shammai's original logic? Right. So let's go back to the Rashbam. Right, the Rashbam, who thinks that the reason why the father in our original story was HaKoteiv Nechasav Yonatan ben Uziel, the reason why he gave his property to Yonatan ben Uziel was so that the children would not inherit. Shammai's problem was that avarta al divrei hamet, right, that you are violating what the deceased wanted to do, and therefore the matana ina matana, right? Which looks on some level exactly like the story in Beit Poron. So how does the Rashbam explain the relationship to the sugya? So Shammai hayato eben maaseh Beit Poron the kama. Amar lo natati lecha et sheli al menat shetakti shem shamayim. Right, the son in the story of maaseh Beit Poron, where it says lo natati lecha et sheli al menat shetakti shem shamayim. I gave you the stuff on a condition. You can't be makdish it. I gave it to you on a condition, and the fact that you tried to be makdish it and doesn't work. Meaning, if you try to violate my condition, that retroactively invalidates the matana, right? So that's that retroactively invalidates the matana al dat hanutain. Right, and here too, in the case of the inheritance, right, the fact that you violated divrei hamet retroactively invalidates the matana, the chazara, and what Yonatan ben Uziel was trying to give back to the kids, eina chazara. Right, what's the parallel in the story? Just like there, the matana b'teilah v'gam ha'hefesh lo nitfas. Right, so what's the parallel of the story? Right, the Yonatan ben Uziel trying to give the money back to the kids is violating da'at hanotain, the same way that in the story of Ma'aseh Beit Choron, right, the recipient of the gift trying to be makdish the gift is violating the intention, the da'at hanotain is violating the intention of the person who had given him this gift. And therefore, when we see it, there was a kind of implicit or explicit condition on the gift, right? What does Shammai think? There was an explicit condition on the gift. He violated it by trying to be makdish it in Ma'aseh Beit Choron. Therefore, matana batel, no more matana. So to here, there was an implicit condition on the gift that that Yonatan ben Uziel would not give it to his children. There he's going violating it by giving it to his children. Ina matana. Theoretically, the matana should be batel, and therefore the chazara to the children shouldn't work. So that the hekdesh of the mekabel in Ma'aseh Beit Choron is parallel to the chazara of Yonatan ben Uziel. In our case, that's what Shammai originally thinks. Now, what's ben Uziel's response? Mihu lo damu dehatam parish le behed, right? But it's not actually the same, because what in Ma'aseh Beit Choron the condition was explicit. What did he say? Right, that there was an explicit condition on the gift. Halakhah stamapei Yonatan v'lo pirish right, but in the case of Yonatan ben Uziel, there wasn't an explicit condition. So the gift was a total gift. And how do we know that? Because Yonatan ben Uziel was actually able to do with it whatever he wanted, right? There was no explicit condition on the gift. He gave some of it to Hekdesh, he sold some of it, and yeah, sure, he can do whatever he wants with it. He can give the rest of it back to the kids. Right? So the relationship between the stories, right? Shammai understood Beit Choron as proof that the recipient of the gift can't misuse it, and that trying to misuse a gift with a condition on it renders the gift void. But the stories are actually different, because in Beit Choron there was an explicit condition, so violating the wishes of the person who gave the gift actually voids or nulls the gift itself. Whereas Ben Uziel, there wasn't an explicit condition. He can do with it what he wanted, including violating the implicit wishes of the notary. That's the Rashbam's explanation. Tosfot, on the other hand, is going to see it totally differently, right? Tosfot, who read the neder into the first case of Yonatan ben Uziel, is going to see the neder parallel here and the neder parallel there, and see the question that Shammai is dealing with as a question of, does this workaround actually work in order to allow us to kind of violate the neder, or allow the people who were otherwise mudar hana'ah to benefit? So, Tosfot says, right, right, so that it's like Ma'aseh Beit Choron, that lo hutar ha'av al yedei matanah haben. Right, what's the moral of the story according to Tosfot in Ma'aseh Beit Choron? Right, what do we mean when we say kol matana she'in hiktisha ina mukdeshet eina matana? Right, that the matana doesn't work. It means that if it's not a bona fide gift, if I can't be makdish it, if it's not really mine, if I'm the friend, the recipient, if I can't be makdish it, then the matana clearly wasn't a bona fide matana, right? And therefore there's still some kind of connection between the property that was given and the person who gave me the property, aka the son, the host of this wedding, who was Madir Hana from his father, right? Whose father couldn't benefit from him, and therefore it doesn't actually work as a workaround against this neder, right? So that's what Shammai thought. Shammai thought the moral of the Beit Choron story is these conditional, not quite gifts, right? They don't actually work to get you out of this neder. The neder is still in force. The Yeshiva Yonatan, Eino Kimo Shatasavor, right? Yonatan ben Uziel says, no, it's not actually what you think. Dehatam, right? Because there in Beit Choron, Lo Haita Matana Gmura, it actually wasn't a full matana, and therefore you can't get around the neder, right? Im hekdisha inam deshet, right? The guy tried to be makdish, and the host of the wedding got all upset about it, right? But here Yonatan ben Uziel is saying, for me, matana gmura, right? I could do whatever I want with it. Uvda, right? We know that I could do that because we saw it, I was makdish part of it. It worked, right? This is the fact that Yonatan ben Uziel was makdish part of it is going to show that this is the kind of matana that imikdash mukdeshet, and therefore full matana, and therefore I can even violate the neder, right? Therefore, the neder is no longer enforced. So, right, the parallel to Yonatan ben Uziel, right? The parallel in the story, right, is that the of Yonatan ben Uziel trying to give the money back. Yonatan ben Uziel giving the money back to the kids isn't parallel to the man in Maaseh debate Kol Ron who was makdish the money, right? That's what the Rashbam thought. There, avar divrei hamei to lehachzir the money, and here avar divrei hanotein to be makdish the money. No, the parallel here is the chazara to is that the man at the wedding who tried to be makdish the property, right? But there it didn't work. Is just like Yonatan ben Uziel trying to be makdish the property, and there it did work. And that shows that it's a bona fide, that there's actually a difference between those cases. It is a bona fide gift, and therefore the as opposed to Maaseh de Foron, where he couldn't offer the food to the father, or that the matana didn't work for those purposes. Here, Yonatan ben Uziel, the matana was a matana gemara, and therefore he could return the money to the children. So, right, the relation between the stories according to Tosfot, Shammai understood Beit Foron's proof that giving property as a kind of conditional gift through a third party doesn't work as a workaround to get you out of the neder. That's what Shammai originally thought. It doesn't work as a workaround. It's conditional. Therefore, the matana is not a real matana, and it doesn't get you out of this neder. But the stories are actually different because in Beit Foron, because of this explicit condition that we saw, right, the actual conditionality of the gift made it the case that the gift didn't work in order to get you around this neder. But in our case, because the gift itself really wasn't conditional, the raya being that he could be makdish it, right? Then it does work as a workaround, and that was Yonatan ben Uziel's answer. The neder is no longer in effect, and Shammai was makaba. Right, so we see two different reads of the kind of original case of the original argument between Shammai and Yonatan ben Uziel. Right, for the Rashbam, the father wanted to keep the money away from his children. For Tosfot, he wanted to find a way to give the money to his children. And that machloket we see kind of how it impacts how each of them read the second story and the relationship between the second story and the first. So for the Rashbam, right, the problem with Maaseh de Foron is that, right, because of this condition on the gift, right, he couldn't misuse it. That was what Shammai was originally thinking in our case as well. Because of this condition, you can't be over al divrei hamed, it just doesn't work. Right? Whereas for Tosfot, the fact that there was a condition on this gift made it not constitute a workaround. Right? The fact that it wasn't really a bona fide gift meant that you couldn't get around the neder. And in both of them, the fact that in Maaseh de Foron, the condition was explicit and the condition was real was different from, right. That was the piece that Yonatan ben Uziel said that's not true here. In my case, it really is a bona fide gift, and therefore, according to the Rashbam, I can do whatever I want, including giving it to the kids you didn't want. And according to Tosfot, I can do whatever I want, including giving it to the kids, which is ultimately what the father wanted. But the fact that I could do whatever I wanted meant that the neder no longer applies in this case. Just to go very quickly to this another kind of moment in Tosfot, it's a kind of a cool little addition that we get in Tosfot, which is that there's another version of the story in the Yerushalmi, but in which the characters are sort of flipped around a little bit. Within Mashma Yerushalmi, v'nedarim dekamar Yonatan ben Uziel hidiro aviv min Nechasav amad v'katvol l'Shammai. Right, Masa Shammai machar miktatam v'gdish miktatam v'natan lo et Hashem. Right, so the Yerushalmi also brings the story of Yonatan ben Uziel and Shammai and a father, but instead of Yonatan ben Uziel being the third party, here Yonatan ben Uziel is the son, and he's the one who is kind of unable to inherit from his father, and his father gives the money to Shammai. Shammai's the third party, so the trick happens, but in a slightly different configuration. All right, Amar right kol mi sheyavo v'yar'er al matana hazot yotzei mina l'kuchot miyad ha'hekdesh v'achar kach yotzei miyad zeh. So Shammai's the one doing the trick that Yonatan ben Uziel is doing in our sugya. So maybe it's actually talking about it's the same story, and the Yerushalmi and the Bavli just are kind of giving us slightly different accounts of who the characters were, but maybe it's not two different stories. Maybe it's actually the same story. Just a nice little vignette that we get out of this Tosfot as well. So hopefully this sugya offered, right, a window into both right a kind of cool machlok this cool machloket Tosfot and the Rashbam with regard to what's going on in what was going on in this particular sugya in this particular case, and honestly gives us a different window into why someone would be Kotev Nechasav La'acherim, whether it's related to whether it's a way of trying to kind of get out of Yerusha, or actually a way of trying to be able to offer your children Yerusha in a case when otherwise you wouldn't have been able to halakhically. And hopefully this will also offered us a window into really the larger questions that we've that have, I think, been coming up throughout this Perek of why Yerusha does what it does and works the way it does, and why we care about it, why we care about success, kind of biological succession when it comes to property more broadly. Thanks so much, and have a good week.